kind of like I think people like Mike because I'm kind of a unique kind of character.
And I have
You just see how games and possessions are more intense, how they mean more.
I'm not putting him on.
I think the U.S. is going to obviously win.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Nothing But Respect. My name is Harry Krinsky. I am joined in a full body cast by Patrick Redford, and here to help us kind of figure out what Patrick's problem is physically is Henry, the great Henry Abbott. Henry, how are you?
What's up with the full body cast? What are we talking about here?
He was in a bike accident recently.
Oh, no.
And his hips have tightened up. His hip mobility is trash now. Like it's all he needs like dynamic stretching and all that.
And
stuff.
now in lieu of a doctor, you have a journalist. Like, this is a desperate situation.
Before we get started, do you take United Healthcare? Just
sure,
I have to
why not?
ask. Okay.
I don't provide medical services, but I'll take your money, sure.
No, we are. Well, yes, we are joined by Henry Abbott of True Hoop, of ESPN Digital, of just a godfather of basketball writing. But we are actually, we're not talking about the past, at least right now. We are going to talk about the future because Henry has a new book coming out tomorrow. If you Tuesday, May 6th, called Ballistic. It is about basically the future of kind of like injury prevention and how that relates to both being just like an individual person trying to be healthy, but then also the future of the of how that affects various professional sports leagues, which are, of course, have hundreds of millions, if not more than that, money riding on their athletes, being healthy and all of that. And so the first question I wanted to ask you, Henry, is as we were talking about this, is like you've been a trendsetter in all kinds of different ways. You were blogging before blogging was big. You moved to Substack before Substack was big. You were doing these talking about things in basketball that then became like dripped into the more mainstream. And then your next book decision or your next project was to like dive into the world of the future of biomechanics and biomedicine and all that. Why was that your next move?
I saw that question in the document you nicely shared. And it was a fair question. I had to think about it. And my best answer, I think, comes from the fact that, like, my dad, rest in peace, was a doctor, and he would come home from work and tell us about his, like, interesting cases at work. And after a while, I realized, like, some of what doctors do is based on their medical training and academic research, and some of it's just doctors just making shit up, right? Like, they'll, like we, I would be like, hey, did I break my finger? And he'd be like, no, it looks fine. And I'm like, wait, is that, like, a medical assessment, or is that just, like, a dad just who has, like, extra authority because you're Dr. Abbott, right? And and over time it became clear like a pretty hefty bunch of what medical people do is accept the responsibility for like someone has to make a call here, right? And when it comes to preventing injuries, that's like the whole NBA gets this kind of advice, but like it is not well studied, right? Like I guess the Suns were the first ones to really have this like biomechanical program where they would put players through like a physical assessment, and they started getting like Stephon Marbury, Grant Hill, all these dudes who'd been dogged by injuries would go there just to be healthy, right? And that's great, but those assessments were not scientifically based, right? They were not saying like, oh, like, we have this giant database which shows you that if you move like this, then X, Y, and Z thing happens. And at the same time, I started covering the league in the 90s, and like everybody gets hurt. Everybody. It's just a tragedy. Like Tom Haberstroh tweeted a few weeks ago that like half of the stars of the NBA were out injured that day. And so it's just been rolling forever that just like everybody gets hurt. It's terribly sad. Then all my friends are hurt. I got hurt. And it just seemed like we got to do better. And there's like, okay, the answer to all of this seemed to be Marcus Elliott, this place in Santa Barbara where instead of making shit up, they actually have gone to the trouble of tracking how tons of people move. They have 134.4 terabytes of movement data from elite athletes. And they're doing like the cause and effect. Like when you move like X, the result is Y. And they're turning the page on this kind of sad chapter of everyone just running around and getting hurt all the time. And instead having a little bit more thoughtful, like, let's try to prevent the crises that ruin sports.
I loved the book, or at least the parts that I've read. And I'm so glad that Derrick Rose came up super early in the book, because I think of that injury as like this real turning point. And maybe this is just because I was like in my formative early basketball watching years, but I remember the great Danny Chow wrote this story that totally changed the way I have thought about basketball forever, basically, where it was something like a gait analysis. And his point was basically, yes, Derrick Rose is explosively athletic in all the ways we think about that word, but like basically his heel striking running style is like a critical part of athleticism. And like, that is, I don't know, like essentially that biomechanics and a sort of like fluidity of movement is as important as like explosivity. So like, how did that, like, does that injury hold sway? Like, is that an important sort of marker for you as well?
Yeah, that was a big deal. I mean, he was young. He was the MVP, and I think he was 23, I want to say, when he tore his ACL. And what we think is athletic is stuff that's really easy to notice in like SportsCenter highlights, right? Which is explosive movement. But there's so many other things that we do that aren't just creating giant forces and like hip extension, really. Like the one guy's like, every SportsCenter highlight is hip extension. Like your hips are bent and then they're straight and then you make a highlight, right? But our bodies do all kinds of things. And you know, once you have 134 terabytes of data and look at like how do people move in ways that correlate with success, like very little of it is just outforcing everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. So much of it, and really like their whole game is really about kinematic movement. So I could talk for a long time about like what that means. I don't want to get super boring, but like it's basically the neurological coordination, orchestration of your 600 muscles. If you're kinematic, then you're pretty good at moving forces around your body in ways that turns muscles into rubber bands, so they like spring you into the next step, right? Mm-hmm. You lose a lot of that when you heel strike. And then the other one is just landing, so that the stacked joints, right? Landing is when we get all the biggest forces of our experience. This is when you injure everything in your non-contact injuries, and it's really like your ankles, knees, and hips. They want to bend in unison, which is coordinating quite a lot of muscles. If they bend in unison, then you're not going to Derrick Rose up here, you know?
Yeah, that like I think the really enticing thing about this book is like when I see something like the Damian Lillard Achilles, or I watch like, you know, the unks of the league like kind of go out and have struggle, I just think about mortality basically.
Absolutely.
And this book sort of offers a way through in a way, not like in a Brian Johnson immortality sense, but like you actually can, I don't know, like I think sports fans just take injuries as this like inherent vice, like knees break, ACLs break. Essentially, it's just a matter of luck. And I think this book sort of doesn't agree with that thesis, right?
Oh, that's at one point I asked Marcus, like what Marcus, the book is kind of focused on the life work of this Dr. Marcus Elliott, who I will constantly refer to as Marcus, and assume you all just know who I mean, because I've been living in this shit for a while. Yes. But I asked Marcus, like, what's the kind of base level mistake we're making where we all just go down this road of assuming this? And he's like, that's the assumption right there. The trouble is that we just think these massive injuries are part of sports, which lets everybody off the hook. Right? Like nobody did anything wrong if everybody just knows you're going to shrug at the next man up, right? But the fact is, like, the first time someone really went to a lot of trouble to study what's upstream of these crises, we found a whole bunch, right? It's a little bit, the model is the heart attacks, right? So, you know, heart attacks were seen as random acts of God for thousands of years. If you look at the history of cardiology, it's just like they're literally these treatises of like, maybe he died because he coveted this other guy's wife, right? And like, until the electrocardiogram lets you actually see the movement of the blood through the heart, and then you could see that the arterial blood flow slows down for a decade, and then you have the heart attack, right? And so that's how we treat heart attacks now. Most successful intervention in medical history is we're going to do some tests, and we're going to figure out 10 years before your heart attack that you need to change your diet and exercise, and you have to go on to medicine, right? So the first time somebody really seriously tried to find that for ACL tears, they found a whole bunch of stuff. That's what this book is about. Like, what did they find, right? Like everyone else just didn't look before, and like it's like everyone's just making shit up, right? The whole like how we're going to stop you from tearing your ACL was just like, just make it. Just as my dad at dinner being like, no, your finger's not broken.
Yeah.
A couple of things that's funny that the figuring out heart attacks undermined, you know, now people aren't going to church anymore. We're about to have a trade war with China because the third spaces are eroding. It's all like that was the
It's all true. Yeah.
Can you actually, because this is a great, to show how rudimentary it was even 15 years ago, can you tell this story about Kyle Korver's knee issues because
I
Kyle
love
Korver's a character in this book. He is a great example. Just at a high level, he won. He was an all-star for the first time in his career at 34, which is amazing. He was also part of that hilarious 5-man Eastern Conference Player of the Month thing, which is the stupidest thing ever, but not Kyle's fault. Can you tell this story about what Marcus and P3 figured out about Kyle?
Yeah. So Kyle went to Creighton and was drafted by the Nets and traded to the Sixers for a copy machine. That's a little fact I like to include. But for the money, they became a copy machine. And
that's true. He's not joking.
That's really true. He really was traded for the. And I would like to know, if I were Kyle, I would want to know, was it a color copy machine or a black and white copy machine? Because it makes a big difference. The price is wildly variant there.
Do they
right?
still have it? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, that was a while ago. So he had tremendous knee pain at Creighton, but he just figured he would get to the NBA and then those people would know what to do about it. And then he got to the Sixers and they were like, remember that like older Iverson, Derek Coleman team? And he realized like he was the least important person to the trainer, right? Because they had all these dudes who were playing a lot of minutes. They had to get out there. And so he didn't get a bunch of great care, but his knees were just killing him. And then he actually got traded to Utah because Gordon Giertych said some shit to Jerry Sloan and they tried to trade Gordon. And so when he gets to Utah, they have this guy who's really Mark McCown was his name, who was super fired up about taking people to P3. And he told Mark that his knees really hurt. What he didn't tell Mark was he was considering retirement because of it. He was really in a ton of pain. And he had all the regular, like, ibuprofen, ice, did these PT exercises, all the stuff that we all go through. Wasn't helping. And so he goes through his P3 assessment, and which is a pretty involved thing. Might take a second here to tell you what that is involved in that. So there are 2 force plates in the floor. There are 6 infrared cameras in the ceiling. And at that time, they're switching now, but they would put 22 little points all over your body so it looked like you were going to be in a video game, that motion capture thing. And you move for like 40 minutes doing like one-off skaters and stepping off the box and exploding into the sky and all kinds of moves. And it's all on video. And when Kyle finished his assessment, they called him over to the screen and said, here, look at this. And as he was bending his knees to jump, one knee physically crashed into the other knee. And he'd been doing this on TV for at this point 5 years.
And he didn't know.
Nobody knew.
It's incredible.
And he almost threw up in his mouth. He was like, it was so upsetting because he was seeing the source of all this pain, right? And long story short, he moved to Santa Barbara. He moved his whole family to Santa Barbara. And he just trained there all the time. And he went from maybe going to retire 3 years into his career to only LeBron lasted longer from that draft class. I think he played, I want to say 18 years, something like that. And there's a great funny little postscript where he gave him friends with Marcus and his family. And Kyle's wife, Julia, was pretty much a big fan of they should retire. He should stop playing. They'd made plenty of money. They could enjoy their life in Santa Barbara, this beautiful house in the hills with a view, blah, blah, blah. And but Kyle kept every summer, his contract would be up, and every summer he'd get another call. And right near the end, she was like, this is finally it. We're going to be done. And then she runs into Marcus, and she's like, this is all your fault. I'm packing my fucking kids from Milwaukee right now. I don't think she said fucking. They're pretty religious. Yeah. I added that, but yeah.
It's awesome.
You referenced this, but can you tell people about the Kyle Korver paddleboarding thing?
Yeah.
Because I remember reading that in Grantland, and my jaw hit the floor. And then it's kind of wild to think 12 years later, he was kind of onto something. There was you could see some version of the future of sports longevity in paddleboarding in the way he did. So what happened there?
So Marcus invited Kyle into this annual tradition that he calls Misogi, which is a little bit like once a year in nature with friends. You do something that you think is so hard, you're only 50% likely to succeed at it. The idea is based on really good, it's like a neuroplasticity exercise. So the idea is that in deep research about human capabilities, we can do a lot more than any of us do. So but your brain stops you, right? So how do you convince your brain to let you, if I try to do an Ironman tomorrow, my brain would already be like, oh, no, we're fucked. And just my brain thinking that would literally physically reduce my capabilities, right? And so how do you let your brain believe you can do more? And the idea is you do something like this once in a while. And so the first one that Marcus convinced Kyle, who grew up in a landlocked place, had never paddleboarded in his life, went to the Channel Islands, which you can see from Santa Barbara. But it's almost it's almost 30 miles, and it's choppy water. There are definitely great white sharks in that water. There are killer whales, and there's a bunch of other just sort of semi-dangerous things. Seals. Seals can be a little nasty. Boats.
Like
currents.
wakes. That's like a shipping channel. Like
it's a shipping channel. People are a little scared of the channel, right?
Yeah,
like,
I'm
it's
scared of the channel.
Yeah. And Marcus was like, yeah, no, it'll be great. We got a guy, we're going to go paddleboard from there to here. And he fell off. Kyle fell off in like the first minute. And it was 9 hours. Turned out to be 9 hours of paddleboarding. And Kyle directly attributes that with setting the NBA record for like, he had the longest number of games with a 3 made, consecutive games with a 3 made. He says it's strictly because he just got super intentional about, rather than trying to get to the shore, he's like, no, I'm going to have one perfect stroke, which was exactly the same mentality he used to hit all those threes.
That's incredible. So, without going full, because we don't want to step out the whole book, and it would take the whole book to describe this, but like, who is Marcus? What's this guy's deal?
Yeah, fair question.
yeah, how is he like this?
Yeah, he's an unusual guy.
Is it an interesting critter?
Yeah, he grew up in the middle of nowhere. So his dad was a sculptor and got this deal where they could live on these 600 acres in exchange for the guy who owned the 600 acres getting like a right of first refusal on the sculptures that were made there. And so they lived almost for free on this land. And he just had this kind of unsupervised childhood where like literally he would go for days on end, like accompanied by the trusty family dog. And he would just like kind of have this own kind of self-reliance kind of vibe. And he became super athletic, but didn't play any sports because he wasn't really even part of society, right? And then eventually he got signed up for like he got signed. They asked him if he wanted to play. No, his buddy's mom signed him up for Little League Baseball and asked him what position he played. And the only position he could name was pitcher because he'd never seen a baseball game. And he was like in middle school. But he became, of course, immediately like an amazing pitcher and then football player and all blah. And he thought he was going to be like a very good football player, the kind who would play in college. And on his 17th birthday, he tore his ACL. And actually, we focus on the ACL. I do. But the fact is he tore 3 ligaments in his knee. And then he thinks that I overemphasize the importance of this, but I think there's some drama in the fact that his buddy got the position in the offense as wide receiver with all the balls going to him. And then Marcus' girlfriend left him for that buddy.
I don't think that's overemphasizable.
What the fuck?
Yeah, you can like.
He's like, there's a Mark Zuckerberg, the social network, like, except for I'm never gonna have an ACL tear ever.
This guy sounds like an American mythic figure. Like he emerges from the woods and becomes a football star and has his girlfriend yoinked. Like this is like if you hit translate on like some story from like the American mythology. This is perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then he has a subscription to an academic journal that he reads while he's spending 6 months. So they have 600 acres, and he's the most outdoorsy kid ever. And he spends 6 months in his bedroom, in his words, depressed.
Right.
And he's just like, what am I going to do? He felt like the whole world was like kept right on spinning without him, as if nothing had happened. He'd just been sucked out of the world, and he's like, this is a bummer. Like in the hospital room, everybody brought flowers, but like a week later, he's like, it's just me and my dreams are fucked. And so he was like, you know what I do have going for me is my whole future is a blank slate and I can make it whatever I want. And I'm going to make it study the human body so hard that I can prevent the injuries that ruin sports. And then he did what anybody would do and became, first he studied microbiology at UCSB. Then he became a professional lifeguard and a professional triathlete. And he competed against Lance Armstrong and stuff. And then he was so dorky in studying every academic study on performance that he became like an advisor to all these like track cyclists and all these elite bikers and stuff. And then eventually he got into Harvard Medical School and became a full-on doctor. And he studied with Tim Noakes in South Africa, who was like a big deal in the world of running and exercise physiology. And then this guy named Bert Zarens was the like team doctor for the U.S. Olympic team and the Patriots and a bunch of teams. And Bert Zarens like reached out to him because he knew Marcus had done this work on preventing hamstring injuries in hurdlers. And Robert Kraft had told Bert Zarens that the team had to get better at hamstrings, which is just a great thing for a billionaire to say. Get better at hamstrings. And so
he's kind of onto something, I do have to say.
Yeah. So then they did. Marcus did like a giant study of just like what temperature, what time of year, what position, what gait, what all these things, like what correlates with a hamstring injury. And then he would fly personally and work out with the highest risk athletes, and their hamstring injuries just fell off a cliff.
They got good at hamstrings.
And
what's endearing to me about this story is he's hitting a lot of the same beats that you hear about the mythology around kind of Silicon Valley folk, about like outsider, thinking about things differently, it causing this disruption or whatever, but is putting it in what I feel is a more kind of like a better place, which is like ending human injury and not trying to like develop a way to, take 1% of every single ad dollar ever sold or whatever. So I it's cool, but he does seem to have from the top down a like real commitment to like heterodox, thinking about injuries, which clearly the world of extreme sports or like professional sports needed like heterodox disruption.
Yes, there's a couple of little parts of the book that apply exactly to what you're saying. Like one is, I've seen this and it's really hard to explain, but like, when I first started being an NBA journalist, I did a story with Rich Dalatry, who was the Nets trainer at the time, and some Nets. Jason Kidd was new there then. That's how long ago it was, and Jason Kidd did Pilates, and Rich Dalatry was interested in bringing Pilates to the rest of the team, but he was scared because if you bring them anything that doesn't immediately deliver results, then they discount you a little bit, right? Like you have to there's like athletes are so inundated with like advice and people who have gadgets or potions or whatever, and they're mostly just like no to all that. So in that environment, it's amazing to watch. Like Marcus will walk over, he isn't the day-to-day trainer, but they'll be training on the floor P3, and he'll go and talk to DeAndre Ayton or whoever it is, and he'll just like put his arm on her shoulder and be like, "Hey man," and I can't hear what they're saying, but like you can see DeAndre's just like locked in. There's something, and I ask other P3 people, I'm like, how does he get that? And they're like, there's something about they just know that he's like, he wants them to be moving well and healthy more than anything. And there's no like shenanigans. And like, I think also related is he's terrible at business. Like this, like the Silicon Valley thing is like, I'm sure I don't have the right brain for it, but somebody could look at Marcus's like position in the world and like, we can make some goddamn money here. Right. And, like that is not like, at one point I was interviewing an academic for this book and they were like, oh, well, like, P3 says this, but they do that because they want to sell you something. And I was like what? You know what I mean? Like
he doesn't seem to have monetized it really. Like
they don't have a thing.
It seems genuinely mission driven. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing. The three of us right here. They have nothing. Not one thing to sell us. Like
amazing.
They don't have a thing. Like they don't have it. They don't have an app. They don't have a. Well, like, this book is the thing, I guess. Yeah. But that's me. It's not him. Anyway, yeah. It seems inarguable that he's on this very honest mission, and it's caused him a bunch of trouble. I think the mission doesn't really fit in the world of sports a lot of times, but that's what he's doing. He's super clear about it.
And to that point of it not fitting, I think the stuff that I found sort of the most interesting is this kind of what you were talking about like thinking different, like rewiring your brain. Like the word neuroplasticity comes up in the book a bunch of times, and I found that to be like very powerful. Like I'm playing tennis for like the first time in my life, and I'm like not good at it, but it is shocking how like from like the 8th time I've played to like the 12th, I feel like 4 times the player. And I think it literally is just because like I believe that I can like hit the shot, and it's like this coordination of movement that is totally alien to me, but like upon doing it, I don't know, I feel like my brain becoming stronger. And so I want to use that as a way to ask you about the title of the book, because that comes up in the intro and I found that very interesting.
Yeah, it was a choice. I went into this thinking that word was like a military word, right? And so it's a little weird, and there were definitely some concerns in the process. But it's a word they say all the time at P3, right? In the world of biomechanics, it's a super clear, useful term that means airborne, right? It means, and these are 2 things, right? One, it's when all the injuries occur. Right, Derrick Rose's landing, is because he was being ballistic, and that's why it was enough force to tear his ACL so easily. But it's also the training that you want to do to have your body absorb that landing better, right? You want to do ballistic training. I think that's one of the big takeaways is everybody who goes to B3, they want to have them doing plyometrics and getting bouncy and using this neuroplasticity that you're describing, like to land differently and better so that you can, and once you get that down, you can say yes to almost every invitation, right? You can go through life and do a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah. Like I've had this like sort of image of my own body in my mind that, like, I used to run in high school and stuff. And I always thought, like, okay, once you cross 30, you just can't, like, your joints just get brittle.
Now you're done.
You legitimately can't move different anymore. And you, like, the opening anecdote of this book is like you running a half marathon and getting all fucked up, basically. How did that experience of going Phil Jackson mode sort of like get you thinking about this?
Yeah, I always thought of myself as kind of like a blessed person where I could just, like, my body could do a lot of stuff and I just felt like great. But the fact is, like, every now and again I'd have I don't know, once a decade or so, I'd have like some signal that my hips and back were like bitter and angry and a little touch of the Phil Jackson. And it got really bad in the middle of writing the book, which was such a bummer because it's like my editor, Tom Mayer, who's a great guy who made the book so much better. But the first time we met after we made the book deal, he was like, this book is about the joy of movement. And I was like, oh, that's right. He's right. He's totally right. That's what it's about. And then, like, fast forward a year, I've half written the book and I'm in, like, the fetal position on my left side in the dark with an open bowl of Tylenol on the floor. And, like,
Oh my God.
and, like, my brother-in-law stopped by for Christmas and he's like brought something up to the room. And I thought I was like together. I was like, oh, like, I'm getting better. My back's on the mend. I kind of have my system down. I got the Theragun. I got the heating pad. And, like, now I'm good. And he's just like, this is so sad. He's just looking at where I'm sleeping next to the dog bed, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's true. I guess it's super sad. So yeah, I think it's become, terrible. Chronic pain is terrible. I feel for everybody, as millions of Americans are living with this, and I've been through some phases like that, and it's the worst. But at the same time, it's also made me super attuned. Like, if somebody tells me now, like I was lucky enough to go through the treatment at, like, P3's sister business, The Lab, saved me, really. And when they tell me now you need to do these exercises because I've been in extraordinary pain, like, I don't do that, like, non-compliant physical therapy thing. I do the compliant.
You're extremely motivated. Yeah.
Yeah. I really believe. And, like, I want to take care of this, because I think there is a way to make it better so I can have this mobile, fun future. And I think that we should do that.
Ballistic is an example of this, the word. There's, like, a few other ones, like, there's a whole language in this book of, like, different, like, blenders is one, which is, like, a term for people whose the way they absorb the energy on landing is different than a certain group of other people, which are called, what are the people who absorb it?
Yielders.
What is it?
Yielders.
Yes. Yielders and blenders. And there's a whole, as I was thinking about it, I was having this sort of, like, in a college dorm room taking acid for the first time, being like, wow, like, language really is evolving constantly and unlocks things, because even on this pod, like, an early episode of this pod was about the term aura, which was this, like, kind of stupid, but actually ultimately really helpful and load-bearing term to help move through basketball. And I think the same thing is with all these ones. Another one that, like, was a total that I didn't hear from your book, but you reiterated in the book, was a total, like, light switch for me around this, was the concept of James Harden as in the 99th percentile of deceleration. Which is basically, for those, like, he was the best at putting the brakes on in an athletic context of every NBA player studied, and Luka Doncic, I think, is in the 92nd, or at least was, which we might get to.
Yeah, he's receded somewhat. Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah.
But what other? I'm curious about just, like, your sense of, like, why they use all this language, because Marcus is really big on using all this language as a way to actually retrain your brain while you're just kind of hanging out. And then, in addition to deceleration, what are some other ones? What are that describe athleticism that might that we might not exactly have the word for in regular basketball conversation?
Okay. So the language thing, I think, is ultimately disappointing. As someone, for me, I'm trying to take this sacred knowledge from P3 and make it plain spoken for everyone to appreciate. And like, biomechanical terms in general are the worst collection of words I know of. Like this abduction, adduction. Like, you know about this?
Yeah.
Like if you
No,
like,
what is it?
So you
Oh my
steal
gosh.
someone's hips, correct?
yeah, pretty much. So like, I hope I have this right. Like if you are pulling your leg toward the midline of your body or any limb, that's adduction. So like your groin is your leg adductor. Abduction is moving away from the midline of your body, like it's being abducted.
Okay.
So like this is anyway. So, but meanwhile, that's just one little part of it. There's like a dorsiflexed foot versus a plantarflexed foot, which is like toes up towards your shin or toes pointing down, and they just use like dorsal, plantar, abduction, adduction, like or the planes. Are you moving the transverse plane or the sagittal plane? Like, you guys.
I like to switch it up personally.
Yeah, me too. None of them, not one biomechanical thing has an intuitive name. It's just bad naming. Like it's just so impossible so we start with that. The beginning point before they start Intuition P3, this is the world that everybody studied who works there. And then they start finding things no one's found before, like this blender thing is one of their own things. Or anyway, and so now we're just like we're in a terrible forest of confusing terms, and we've gone through the forest to the other side where they have to like make up new, even more confusing
love
terms.
that.
Yeah.
None of it is useful to us, right? Like, but anyway, so I'm trying to just like put everything in plain English and failing all the time, right?
Well, but if you are a athlete who, it's almost like if you are a writer or a poet, you like learn all these new words because it's part of your craft. If you are a athlete and your whole life is about moving your body in interesting ways, my guess is having words like abductor and adductor is very helpful for somebody like DeAndre Ayton or Zion Williamson or whatever.
I don't think they use them honestly. Like I think they they every now and again they get someone who's just super into it, and they all get excited at P3 because they love Leonard Hamilton. No, not Leonard Hamilton. Jesus, what's his name? Timberwolves, like second-year player Leonard.
Leonard Miller.
Leonard Miller. Leonard
They love
Hamilton,
Leonard Miller?
retired coach of the. Leonard Miller is like a great guy, like super great guy, and he's super interested in all of what they do at P3, and he like sits in the back of the computer and he wants to learn, and he's training like somewhat for the NBA, but also to improve his position on the little P3 map of all NBA players, right? And like he's a great guy.
The Pelotonization of biomechanics.
Yeah. So there's some people who are just like, this is what their hobby is, but I think mostly they just have to try to get them to be athletic by saying as little as possible.
Okay, good.
Like just as much as they can get across. They want you to think about your hip mobility, your hip stability. Okay. So to your other point about what are some other things, it turns out that landing on the outside of your foot and rolling to the inside is correlated with 100% of the ACL tears they've tracked in the NBA. Like nobody, they call it translation. It's another new name, but if you have a little bit of that, okay, it's fine. But if you have 25 degrees, your shin kind of goes like a windshield wiper, puts your knee in a terrible position. They have not studied a single NBA player with an ACL tear who doesn't land that way.
Wow. So this isn't just like you could just take a funny, like, I mean, obviously like freak things happen, but like, I don't know, like the fact that you can predict this is just crazy in the first place to me. Like that I don't know, that's amazing.
Yeah, once you look, I felt a little bit like the heart attack thing where it's like, once you notice, oh, it's the blood flow slowing down. They're like, oh, it's like these injuries are landing with messed up form. And they're like once you know that it's that, it's not so complicated. They're to them, it's like they say it for all the time. It's high school physics. It's high school physics. Right. It's high school physics. You can see in the little model, like if your knee is like this, then the force is coming down in a way that your knee can't cope, right? The second most common factor in ACL injuries in P3's study of NBA players is some of us, as you squat, so as your hips go down, some people have the femur, the upper leg bone, rotates in place. I can't see it with the naked eye. I think maybe Marcus can, but as it does
Crazy
that,
to think about that bone rotating.
I know you don't. I don't think you want to.
You don't want, yeah. Is that good, doctor?
It's like twisting the drumstick off the turkey, and it'll tear your ligament. It'll tear your ACL. And so, this is a little bit, Kyle Korver's knees knocking together. That's called valgus collapse, and valgus collapse has been a major factor in biomechanics, and it's kind of here or there. It's been studied the most, and it seems to have an implication in knee injuries, but then sometimes it seems not to in other studies. And what they're finding at P3 is that when your femur rotates, it creates valgus collapse. Those cases are terrible, high risk for catastrophic knee injuries. There are other valgus collapses where your leg doesn't rotate, and those ones aren't so dangerous, right? So this is why it's been this confusing signal. Is like it's the rotation that puts the real stress on the ligament. There are so many. I keep going all day, but there are all these factors that no one's ever considered before that seem to be like the most important factors, right?
This is okay. So this is interesting, and I feel like it's coming around at a time when like we've talked a lot about like the professionalization of the lower levels, and where players are coming in the NBA specifically, more NBA ready, and you're seeing like the Thompson twins, for example, and teams like the Rockets and the Thunder succeeding with all these like 22-year-old type guys. And I wonder how much of that is also, I mean, obviously not everyone is going to P3, but like, do you get a sense that there's like this sort of better understanding of like how to move, or that like, I don't know, like, do you find any biomechanics adjacent explanation for this, or like a way to think about it?
Yeah, I think there's some, in their truth-telling moments at P3, they'll tell you they're mostly disappointed with how bodies are treated. And mostly what happens, mostly the way you get to the Thompson twins is there's a billion people playing basketball and some bodies survive it, right? At one point, Marcus and I and some teenagers who are too fit for their own good climbed this mountain above Santa Barbara, and it's all this like, there's barely any soil, right? It's like rock dust, and there's a few pine trees, and Marcus is like, I'm like, how do they even live here? He's like, oh, it's a terrible environment, but they're the survivors, like NBA players, right? Like it's a terrible environment for a human body, but like some people can make it, right? Wow. It's not because anyone's doing anything well. It's because like just a fucking tree can live in a rock. It just can't. So I think there's a lot of that. But that said, they find that almost everybody they assess needs help with their hips, for instance. And but more and more the players are getting good hip care, at least, from their team. Like there was a little Zach LaVine story of like when the team was trying to rehab him from his ACL tear, and his hips came back with much better numbers than when they left. But he had also had problems with ground contact, the way his foot at the ground, and those had gotten worse because that's not something that teams were so tuned into. I heard a little bit of a thing which is interesting. You may have noticed there are a few players had stress fractures in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And that one theory of that is that teams got really good at, not really good, but much better at getting players stronger, more stable hips. So think about it like it would like hold their upper leg in a strong way, but they'd still be sloppy on the ground, which would put a twist on the bones of their leg, which might lead to these stress fractures. Whereas when they were loose in both places, like you wouldn't put so much tension on the bone, if that makes sense.
That's interesting.
It does. And I guess now as I think about it, I guess these are just like incredibly complicated, interconnected things that are being put through like a meat grinder every day. So
600 muscles, right? It's like a big orchestra, right? And the conductor is your brain.
And like you got to worry about the psoas and the gluteus medius. Like I like that that part of the book about, not part of the book, but that sort of emphasis on like it's not just about like your quadriceps or your biceps. Like there's all these like really interesting weird connector muscles that like you have to think about and stretch and work and stuff. Like
we used to think that it was simple, right? I think back to my PE teachers, and it's like this was my like person who was on the payroll of the school district to make me smart about my body, and like their story was so dumb. The story was that it was just like such a simple machine, right? And like you ding bat, it was all kind of like this kind of vibe, and like it's a super complicated. It's more complicated. There's this Oliver Sacks quote about how like the part of our brain that manages language is like a little tiny thing sitting on top of the ocean of the part of our brain that manages movement. Right? Like how we move our bodies is way more complicated than almost everything else in academia, but we just have pretended for a long time that it's like province of dumb shits, and like we were wrong. It's not.
So I want to actually talk about this, about how the adoption within the NBA has happened, because there's a funny thing going on here where you track it in your book about the relatively slow P3 adoption, even though it's kind of insane outlier things where we're saving people's careers, but it was like slow to adopt. But then even on a more recent level, if you go back the on P3's website, like I think in their timeline it says like 2016 was dubbed the future of biomechanics. There was a ESPN, the magazine story, I think, or maybe a Sports Illustrated story, but like dubbing it the 2016 was the future of biomechanics. But like even now in 2025, 9 years later, like I still don't think we're in kind of like mass adoption of biomechanics by any stretch, basically other than weird stories about LeBron spending $1 million on his body. So why do you think this stuff hasn't popped as much in the way that you would think it would based on the potential like literal dollars and cents upside for NBA teams?
I think one thing is it's just like medical innovation is slow. There's some research that like it's about 17 years from something being like proven in a published study to be more useful to like broad adoption. Okay. Right? We're just maddeningly slow just because we are, right?
Stubborn, yeah.
I do think that the particular mechanism of how we're slow tends to be like, so let's say you're Matt Ishbia. I'm going to pick on him. Mm-hmm. Right? And you probably want to be smart. You want Kevin Durant healthy. You want Bradley Beal healthy. But you have a staff who literally like what P3 has to say about the human body obviates that staff. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know about this data set. They don't know about like machine learning, and they don't know about, translation and stuff. They have very successful careers where they would some research, like these people who have these NBA team jobs, if they lost that job, like the second best job for them pays like a third as much. Oh, right. Man. So they just cling to these jobs. Right. And mostly they tell, they're very trusted and they're very accomplished and good at what they do. And they will tell Matt Ishbia, that fucking P3 is a joke. Like this is not a good use of our money. This is not a use of our time, et cetera, et cetera. So it takes a pretty selfless person to bring P3 in when you don't even really understand what they do. And they're going to make you a little less valuable to the team, right? Mark McCown did it for the Jazz, and a lot of his colleagues were like, what are you doing? This is crazy, And then when eventually he got a new boss, and the boss was like, kick P3 out, removed all the assessment material, all that stuff. But I'm sorry, monologue so much.
No.
But there is a league-wide initiative now. So when they were negotiating the last CBA, a guy from the NBA called Marcus, and they chatted about it, and he's like, I think you want to assess every player 4 times a year. And they're doing it. It's in the CBA. They're installing the facilities at every team, and all that data is going to come to P3 starting next year. So they'll have like real in-season checks of every player.
Whoa.
For real.
Wow. So
could be
Zion might play 40 games then at some point over the next 7 years collectively.
Dare to dream. Yeah.
I love the anecdote about Marcus in the book being, or it was P3 in general, just being obsessed with Zion.
That was so great.
Such a bummer.
Course,
yeah.
I mean, talk about ballistic, dude. That guy gets up.
And somehow, I think because they have like a Team USA deal and a pre-draft and whatever, I think maybe Duke even had a deal, but they assessed Zion 6 times. And so they had this real sense of like, oh, it's kind of like, it's coming, right? And then it doesn't, they don't really, yeah. And Marcus really does lose sleep over that kind of stuff. Like, that's really what he's worried about. It's just like, man. I mean, I think it's in the book. There's a part where I was in the line for coffee in the hotel lobby at the Chicago Draft Combine, and there was a guy who I kind of know who then worked for the Pelicans. He's wearing a Pelicans shirt. And Marcus comes in all kind of like I said, a late night. His hair's all messed up, whatever. And he just sees the Pelicans shirt, and he doesn't even know the guy's name to this day. And he's just like, just starts going in on him about like, like you got to get us Zion. Like we can really help with that guy. Like blah blah. And like poor guy from the Pelicans is like, like that's not really my job. I'm
just 9 a.m.
social media manager.
Yeah.
Reading this book right before watching Warriors Rockets Game 7 was amazing because I was thinking about Jimmy Butler. And I was thinking like, this guy is kind of tiny for someone whose game is just kind of based on like beating the shit out of people. Like he's like 6'4", 6'5", and kind of undersized. And I want to come at you with a theory, which is that he has the best hips of any 30 plus player in the NBA. Like you watch him and you're like, oh, he just achieves perfect balance and like he's boxing out Steven Adams and shit. And it's because he just gets this incredible leverage. So Henry Abbott, your thoughts?
Yes, I think that's a good theory. They did this thing where they took every NBA player and they fed all of their movement data into this like machine learning thing, and it ground away for 6 months. It came away with like every player is one of 7 body types.
Whoa.
Wait,
and,
a machine learning ground away for 6 months?
I don't understand, but yeah, because there's 1 million data points per assessment. And they're just like, what are the trends, right? They didn't know what it would come up with, but it came up with like, oh, they tend to fit in these groups. And
do you know the names of the 7 groups?
I do. Well, by memory, kind of list them off. Certainly, there's the specimen category, which is like Zion. These are players,
bucket getters, unicorns.
So specimens are like they move like the best movers, but they're also surprisingly large for how they move, right? Kinematic movers is like the group that they're training everybody towards. Kinematic means like they are very efficient with how they move forces through their bodies. They can jump off right leg, left leg, both legs. Those players tend to overachieve in the league and not get injured. That's like C.J. McCollum is one, Trae Young. Then there's hyper athletic guards. I think you probably understand that. But then what I'm getting to, there's a group called force movers. Ooh. And I got a feeling we might find Jimmy Butler in that force mover category. Then there's like traditional bigs, which is not really where you want to be. And then there's a couple others, it's on you can find it all. The P3 Instagram has a really good diagram, a map of like including with some examples of who's in each category.
Although, if you really want to know, you should buy Ballistic and Source tomorrow.
Yes.
You should probably buy 2 copies if you think about it.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
It makes a great. I mean, because the thing about like anyone you would get a gift for has like a body, and so I think
hips.
that's like
Yeah.
I mean, most of my friends,
I'm actually thinking even bigger than you guys, which is you got to buy like 6 of them, tape it together. That's a yoga block. You're going to be wanting to do yoga. You're going to need a yoga block right there.
It's a very practical yoga block. Yeah.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing I was thinking is you watch Amen Thompson guarding Stephen Curry, 15-year age gap. And one of the biggest gaps you would in athleticism if you use only traditional terms. And you think like, oh man, I don't understand how Steph is ever going to get anything done. This guy is 6'7" and he moves like a spider. And then you watch the fourth quarter and like Amen is cramping and Steph is like sprinting around making plays, like, sort of showing perfect balance at all times. And that has me sort of thinking like, is the aging, do you think the aging curve in the NBA will change? And it doesn't have to be necessarily a biomechanics infused thing, but like everyone is coming in knowing like there's all this stuff about Wemby, like doing crazy toe stretches and sleeping 11 hours a night and stuff. And like, I see that. And I think people will be healthy into their early 40s way more consistently, but also like if everyone who's 19 and coming up knows this stuff too, like maybe that could change it. So I don't know.
Yeah, most stuff doesn't work, right? Like, I mean, just the straight up truth of like medical research, right? Is like most of your grandma's theories about like, whatever, just don't population wide have an effect, right? And the things that really have been shown to be effective are mostly banned, right? So I would point out Mark Cuban saying that he thought that with their new program, the Maverick stars could play into their 50s. Yeah. And at the same time, he started funding HGH research at the University of Michigan. It's like, what's your new program, Mark? Anyway, so, there aren't these magic things, right? But I do think that sort of like my opening talk about my dad, and some of it's just shooting from the hip and some of it's really studied, right? Like, I think some of this stuff, there are a few things that really do make a difference, right? And so in Steph's case, like he had all that history of ankle sprains and he really, really worked on his hips, like more than maybe any NBA player ever. Like, I think that we're seeing that, right? Like you want to have very mobile and very stable hips. And it's where most of us break down. And indeed, every single person that has P3 has a recommendation to improve their hips. So I think like that's at the very core of our athletic bodies, right? This is how we connect the 80% of our mass that's in our torso with the ground. Is through our hips, right? This is where the big forces go. Like, so yeah, if you have that together, you have a huge advantage, right? I think that P3 will teach the world that this ground contacts thing, like how your foot hits the ground, giant deal, right? These are very real potent things. Like the, protein supplements, like, I don't think it does shit. Most supplements, I think it's just like, they just don't show up in the research as like significant, right? And like and again, like, unless they're testosterone or HGH or whatever, in which case you're not supposed to take it,
Yeah. I actually am sort of interested in doping, like, and in regards to the NBA and generally, does that come up in the book? And like, I don't really know.
And
a
is
dignified
LeBron
way to-
doing it?
Yeah, like do you think people are doing it, or like do you think it becomes less of a competitive advantage maybe as teams figure out like how to move regular, to use a stupid term?
Yeah, I've written a lot about doping, maybe more than anyone through the years, and it's definitely made me a pariah with the league. When Lance Armstrong's whole thing happened, that book, The Secret Race, came out and explained literally how they doped. And so I took that book to the league and I was like, hey, I thought they would have a good answer. I was like, can you explain to me how like you would catch someone using these techniques? Their response was hilariously inept and stupid, and they were like just yelled at me a ton. And then
No way,
fucking,
the NBA's PR machine shut people down when...
This is so ridiculous. It was so shoddy the way the whole thing went. The head of WADA told me that the NBA's testing is basically a joke, and then I learned all kinds of crazy stuff. Then I got a little mad. I started digging into it. The Congress had the NBA's when they first had the doping program. Congress had their medical director testify. At that time, even the name of the medical director was not public. They like have this guy in, and he confidently tells them that of the first 26 failed PED tests in the NBA, he used his discretion to waive 23 of them.
Just like, it's fine, don't worry about it kind of thing?
Yeah.
What
It's
era
like,
was this? That's
He's just
crazy.
doping a little. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Well, because like,
fine.
but conceivably you could fail for like taking Sudafed. But
Right.
But
Which,
he
of
didn't say
course,
23 of them were Sudafed. That's
Very
not what he said.
congested basketball player.
Yeah.
Well, like the way it works is you get like, Tristan Thompson gets popped, or like Bobby Portis with the Toradol Tramadol thing, and like my conspiracy brain sees relatively fringy players get 25 game suspensions for little things every few years, mostly as a public signifier to say like we're on this, but like I don't know, like I like sort of you frame the book around like these players' bodies represent above all like investments for teams. Like you have this anecdote about a guy at Sloan being like, it doesn't matter if we break Derrick Rose, we'll just like get a new one. Like there's like a real like cold Manichaeanism to it. And I wonder, like, obviously all the competitive incentives are there for players to dope. And like, I'm not saying they all do, or even like weighing a moral judgment or not, but like it would make sense if they were, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I think the way in all pro sports now, I think you have to police it really well, or there are going to be some percentage of people will dope because it's super effective, right? And so I think that's my experience of the NBA, right? Is I don't think, by some dumb luck, I don't think they have this giant, broad, like baseball style, everybody dopes problem. I don't know why not, but that's just like, by and large, players seem pretty naive about it. But every player that I've ever talked to about it honestly thinks that this guy or that guy, and like everybody knows a few stories, right? And everybody's got a few examples, and everybody worries about like, this one trainer in this one city, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think, and to be totally honest, like behind the scenes, one thing I've tried various ways looking at this. I've done a lot more research than I've published, but like one thing that came up, 6 or 7 years ago was basically like Alex Rodriguez is like a hub, according to one guy. And now he's a fucking owner.
Yeah.
Like, what?
And Edwards is going to be able to jump 15 feet into the air next year.
Yeah.
What?
That
That is
crazy.
wild. Like following cycling is, for a lot of very obvious reasons, a really interesting window into this. And there was this big story that was broken by the Escape Collective last year during the Tour de France, where teams were using basically carbon monoxide as a way to achieve like higher hematocrit. And like,
Wait, how do they do it?
So it's basically like it's in the sense that like, honestly,
the dumbest thing ever.
they found in research that cigarette smokers like tend to
Right.
produce more hemoglobin, basically because they have to like survive.
I know
And
that
then-
smokers do well at high altitude.
Yeah, no, it's the exact principle. And so then these researchers figured out like, actually it's the carbon monoxide that does it. And if you do controlled small amounts, you can basically measure a rider's hematocrit by testing them before and after. And then the obvious next step is like, and then you could dope with it. And then all the teams denied it, and then kind of didn't deny it, where they were like, it's not that much more dangerous than smoking a cigarette, which is such a funny thing for like a guy who's won the Tour de France to say. But my takeaway there is basically that teams and anti-doping officials who have now banned the carbon monoxide shit are in this like sort of never-ending arms race between like figuring out exactly how dark you can get into the gray area before it gets banned. And like, I actually don't think that there is like a massive widespread doping problem. I think they've basically figured out how to maximize your edge within like the allowable parameters.
Yeah, I just don't think the sport should police it. Like, I think somebody else should police it. Like, they don't want, like, in the heyday of Lance Armstrong, he was the only moneymaker in the history of the business. They don't want to catch him.
Yeah, it's bad for business.
They don't want to catch him. Like, and so they didn't catch him. Like, there was a time where, like, I forget the exact date, but there was like a time when basically Lance had confessed, and Hein Verbruggen, who was the head of the UCI, was like, oh, no, he's never doped. And it's like, Hein, man, and you're like way behind. You know? Like,
yeah. Like, if you read the affidavit, it's like in 2001, I believe, they like tested a bunch of his old shit from 99, and they were like, damn, bro, you got so much EPO. And then they like flew to the UCI headquarters, made a big donation, and then you never heard of it until 2012. Yeah. Like, that shit was just like there. And honestly, if he stops winning tours in like 2003, this problem never really, like, maybe it never pops up again. I don't know.
And they, you know, the NBA's anti-doping program is not good, right? It's a small number of tests.
And why would it be, right? If you're the NBA doesn't want to catch NBA players.
Yeah, exactly. They just want it to be sufficient that they can point to something. So when fans say, do you have a doping problem? They say, oh, no, we've got blah, 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 right?
Hito Turkoglu banned 15 games.
Every now and again, somebody failed a test, right? But it's, I think I'm right that in the new CBA, if you have whereabouts failures, so basically just like knock on your door and you're not there, you just pay a fine. So that means if you're rich enough, you just never have to get tested. Like, you can spend the whole summer doping every single day, and if they knock on your door, you just don't open the door, and then you pay some money.
That's so funny. That's like in the Lance. We can stop the cycling digression at some point. But one of the most interesting things in the Lance affidavit is they figure out that like the best way to beat an anti-doping test is to just not answer the door.
Yeah. Well, because I think you get 3 a year, Lance did, something like that, where, you know, so they were super masterful in microdosing, and you'd be clean in the morning, and they won't test you in the middle of the night and all that kind of stuff. But if they happen to get you when you're glowing, right, you just lay in your kitchen floor.
Yeah, just like, give me 45 minutes, man.
Nobody's home.
Tell your kids to shut up.
That's hilarious. Well, one of the other, because I want to move into talking a little bit about a different drug, a different kind of doping, the possibility of it. But like broadly, something I was thinking, I'm not sure if I have a full question, but I just something I want to tease out is like this. I grew up in the Bay Area, and this sort of like, we were talking off mic before about Santa Barbara, and this kind of like new agey science world is, it's fun and interesting because people are thinking about interesting ideas. It's also been like co-opted a little bit by like the Maha kind of RFK, like watch out for the vaccines universe. And then like maybe a third pillar of all of this is research into like psilocybin and hallucinogens and kind of like the ways where that, or even like ketamine therapy, the ways that can kind of like help your brain and help you emotionally regulate and all that stuff. And I see this sort of like, there's new way to thinking about science as like the gateway drug into getting into more like, hey, let's go like do MK Ultra shit on Jimmy Butler or whatever. I don't think we're anywhere near that, but I do know that in the Bay Area right now, there is a ton of research into psilocybin helping with mental health, helping with, you know, whatever. Some of it is working, some of it's getting corrupted by weird fucking dumb bullshit. Could you ever see, or even in there, like, you know, if you were to give Marcus Truth Serum or anybody in that universe, could you see them being interested in psilocybin or kind of anything like that?
Oh, you wouldn't have to give him Truth Serum. Okay.
You just give him some psilocybin. Yeah.
There's actually there's a chapter of the book that I wrote up and didn't make it, but like Marcus has this. You know, so Marcus grew up in Marin County with parents who were artists, and his dad had been in Haight-Ashbury, and they were just completely open about like sometimes they use drugs, and they made no effort to like keep that from their kids or make it seem weird or criminalize it or whatever. And I think Marcus still feels that way and talks that way. And he had a story about, I mean, it was kind of like unimportant to the book, which is why it's not in there, but he had a story about going to Hawaii with a close friend, and they were staying with another guy who they didn't know as well, and they ate mushrooms, and then like the guy they didn't know as well kind of wigged out, and then they had this kind of like they're sitting in these little loungers looking at the sunset, but the guy's over here like screaming crazy, like wants to, like hurt himself kind of stuff, and Marcus is like, I think we have to go give him a hug. And like went and gave him a hug, and anyway, it just kind of doesn't matter to anything about what Marcus does. But yeah, I think I see the unifying theme here being that when we thought that human knowledge fit in some narrow lanes, it was just missing so much. And you only have to be legitimately scientifically curious to learn that, like, oh, just over there are like huge opportunities for improvement that we've been remiss in ignoring. So.
And in a basketball specific context, I think like basically Steph Curry teaching the league that 3 is worth more than 2 was like the last big sort of like shift basically in like how the game is played or thought about or whatever that like really like revolutionized things. And the more I read the book, the more I'm convinced that like the next one will be something to do with the body or the brain, which sounds like some shit Peter Thiel would say, but like that is kind of how I was left a bit feeling.
I agree with you. And one thing, because this is making me think of the Maha thing, is like there's a funny tension here where, and this is actually a beautiful thing about sports, honestly, where like in my personal life and like outside of thinking about the highest level of athletes pushing boundaries, like I am super wary of stuff like this. Like I don't like Andrew Huberman. I don't like this kind of like beat death. What's the guy you were talking? Brian Johnson. Like I am super wary of that. I think it's like this weird manifestation of like becoming a robot, becoming the most efficient, person and robbing yourself of your humanity while you're doing it. I am much more comfortable with and much more okay with athletes at the highest level doing this, because like that's the sort of like project they are on, is trying to kind of like beat their bodies, or sort of like conquer their bodies, conquer death momentarily on the basketball court, if you will. So I agree with you that innovation is coming, and I'm much more happy for that sort of like Thielian weird stream to just be for basketball players.
So this is I love that you brought this up. So Marcus, I've ridden my bike. Almost all the interviews in the book were riding bikes or hiking, and
Santa Barbara moment.
Yeah, above Santa Barbara. And so most of the time when I think about the things I learned from Marcus, I think of myself as fully exhausted while he's like fresh as a daisy. And but he goes off. He's super not into this live forever, optimize. He's a big advocate of like eat what you want to eat like your grandparents ate, for instance, right? Because in his argument, like science hasn't really figured out like big health benefits from extreme diets, right? But I don't think that his point is that we want to optimize or be extreme. And his take is that like these people who want to live forever will actually live much less than if they just live normally, right? I think the thing is more, we just don't want to step on the rake, right? Like if you're immobilized in pain because let's say your hips are too immobile, right? Then like you should address that. You should know what that is, and you should address that. Like rather than just so many people we know, like immobility is the 4th leading cause of global death. 5 million people a year die from immobility. How many of those cases are because they just didn't know something about their body they wanted to know, right? Like I think my mom's going through a little bit right now. My mom's like she's having a shoulder problem, but she's kind of in denial about it, and it's keeping her from doing really anything. And I'm like, we just got to get on. Like Marcus's take is they should be speed bumps. They should not be 6-month long, 18-month long, rest of your life long conundrums, right? We should have a better sense of like, oh, last time we assessed you moved like this, but now you're showing this thing, and maybe we can address it like that, right? And I just think that, we just did a very sloppy job of keeping our bodies moving, and we want to get good at that.
That makes a ton of sense, yeah.
Yeah, I just think that's so rational. And I think to Harry's sort of earlier point, like the Silicon Valley optimization of this would like see Marcus's innovations and then multiply them 1.5x and be like, and therefore you will never experience an injury again.
Right.
Like this sort of like totally surreal
You
immortalization.
buy our wearable Marcus watch that
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, their biggest findings in just like preventing crises are things that are largely unknown. So I'm like, okay, if they were just closer, right? If what we were doing was pretty close, there wouldn't be much point in changing anything. But it's like, no. Like the 5-alarm fire things are like secret to your doctor. Like you can go to your doctor and they don't even know you can look at how you move to prevent an injury, right? Like it's not a small opportunity, right? We just like, let's get the basics down, right? Let's get moving in the direction of being healthy, instead of just like feeling our way blindly through this. And then every now and again, you have to go talk to a surgeon who tells you your choices are all like you can get an injection or you can get an operation or you can just stop doing things you love doing, right? Like,
Can we anything else you want to say about Ballistic before we pivot to a little kind of nothing but respect media corner?
yeah, no, just get the whole yoga block worth of ballistics and we're good to go.
Please, yeah.
That's all I gotta say on that. Yeah.
No, and it's great. I'm enjoying it. As it's I'm about halfway through right now, and it's like it's got a great mix of sort of like this strange character study on Marcus, or this character study on the interesting guy Marcus. But then it's just there's a lot of just great NBA nuggets. Like so definitely check it out. Nothing but respect.
The thing that I would say, like
booklet.
people who haven't read it, it's trippier than you think it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just when I was writing, I was like, this is just it's a lot of weird stuff in there. It's just how it is. That's just what happened.
Yeah, I just want to read a line here. An elite practitioner of a variety of Japanese martial arts, Garth enthralled Marcus with a discussion of the Shinto tradition, which held their supernatural spirits in everyday things like bird, trees, and plants. And it's like, that is about Marcus basically fighting a bear. It's great.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about.
All right, let's talk a little. I have a bigger question about sort of your kind of asking you about the lay of the land media wise, but I actually want to start with a smaller question, which is what do you read? What's your media diet when you're kind of consuming basketball media? Of course, with besides the Nothing But Respect podcast.
I read the F5.
Hell yeah.
We love Owen. We had him on not that long ago.
That's like, honestly, that's the only must-read thing in the NBA for me right now.
Fuck yeah.
He's so great.
I mean, it's so crazy. We were just texting Owen, who's great and was awesome on our pod, and brought up this thing that blew my mind, and a bunch of people actually texted me about this weak link theory. And it's funny, like I don't think people are like ripping him off, or like I think this is just how ideas disseminate. But like since talking to him about it, like everybody is being like, yeah, it's a weak link game now. It's a weak link game. Like it's crazy. So he's fucking great. Yeah.
I feel like it's fresh every time. Like there's something like, oh, that makes sense. Never thought of that before. And that's one of my favorite things, right? It's just like a whole new way to think about the game.
Yeah, that's basically like I sort of came up basket blogging during the Henry Abbott, True Hoop, ESPN reign of terror. And I feel like that sort of curiosity was like at the heart of the project. And like
Totally.
that sort of like is very influential in the way I write and think about the game. And I just sort of wondered, like, I don't know, what was your philosophy when you sort of took over that desk?
I guess I felt like, well, the first true post of all time was like kind of dicky, but I quoted like Nate McMillan and Mike D'Antoni and a few others from the beginning of that season. And they were saying basically like, oh, it's maybe not a playoff year for us, but like, we're going to work on player improvement, blah, 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 whatever it was. And then those were like top teams in the West. My point was like, the experts don't know shit, right? Like, so it's like there's just so much available knowledge that like doesn't come from the orthodoxy of like the head coach will impart this. And so it felt like, let's just explore the full landscape of, what we can learn about the game, and analytics were coming along at the same exact time, right? I'm trying to remember, I started Troop in 2005, and I think
what was the goal? Like, were you just like, I'll do a basketball blog, or was there like a specific mission statement?
There was a little bit of a goal. So I was writing for magazines, but I'd have to turn it in like 8 weeks at least before it would appear, which meant there was tons of knowledge that I had that like would die in the meantime.
Right.
Right. And so
8 weeks, that's fucking crazy.
And so I was like, let me first have a home for. I would talk to all these people, right? I did a lot. I was pretty plugged in, but I just had all the people would call me up and tell me this cool stuff, and I was like, what do I do with this? I have nowhere to put this. And so then my friend Alex was a British dork in Brooklyn who he was basically like, he told me 50 times like blogs were great, and he followed this. I wonder if I can remember what his obscure soccer team was. Anyway, but he loved being part of this community that you could only follow through blogs, following his obscure, like, second division soccer team in England. And he showed me that fucking blog so many times. And I was like, I don't care about your second division soccer team. And then at a Christmas party, he literally, like, started a free blogger blog for me. He's like, this is your basketball blog. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. So I just, like, tried a few things, and it started immediately getting responses. It was weird. And so then I was like, all right, it seems kind of serious. Then I started really researching it and figuring it out. But I was just trying to, like, you know, write a more vibrant medium than the magazine, I guess, really. It's the main thing.
Yeah, and it's such a, like, obviously there are, like, all these, like, larger order shifts in media that make this, like, a little less possible. But but, like, vibrant is totally the word. And I feel like a lot of sports coverage is less vibrant. And to me, that's a sort of tragedy because, like, all this stuff is, like, supposed to be fun, and, like, people watch basketball because it's enjoyable. And, like, I remember the True Hoop, like, you guys did, like, a big package about tanking back in the day. And I really liked that it was sort of like, you would just take these, like, very large order questions and just throw, like, 15 writers at it and just be like, what do you think about this? And,
what's
like,
going on with tanking?
Yeah. It was great.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, we learned a lot all the time, right? Those are always the best days where you're, like, publishing something where you're like, I ain't never seen shit like that before. You know, like we'll see where this goes. And we'd hear from all these. I mean, there's a crew of. I mean, I still get these, like, texts from. Well, there's one particular current NBA head coach who, like, is just a true hoop. He just loves that shit, and he would just like he'll just be like, you know, this is like that thing you wrote like 9 years ago, and I'm like, I don't even remember that. Like, but that's very. I'm glad that you do. That's a real honor. But yeah, you know, or mostly it was just these kinds of conversations we're having right now would evolve into like, well, why don't we know what the traveling rule is? That was a weird, like the fucking traveling rule. It's like the most basic rule. And like, and if you go ask, like, I guess Greg Oden, and he was like, yeah, you get 2 steps, right? And it's like, well, I understand why you say that, but like if you go look at the rule book, at that time, it clearly doesn't say that. Right. So it's like, then I went to the head of the referees, and I'm like, you know, how many steps do you get? And he's like, well, it's confusing because you got to count to 2 based on when you gather, and the gather's confusing. Like, and like I sat in his office in Manhattan. We watched a bunch of times, and then he showed me this one Dwayne Wade play where Dwayne Wade like clearly gathered. He slapped the ball, and then he like spun, and then he took one more step, and he's like, yeah, that's legal. And it took me like a while. I'm kind of slow, and like so I called him a week later. I'm like, hey, that Wade play that you showed me, like, it's just full on 2 steps. Like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it just is. And he's like, and then he said the magic words, we don't really reference the rule book. Which became the headline.
That's amazing.
And then they changed the rule. They freaking changed the rule. Because I was just doing nothing except trying to figure out what the rule was. Like, why wouldn't it be simple? Why wouldn't we know the rule? Like,
I found this guy on Instagram a few years. I wish I could remember his name. Whose whole thing is just doing these really elaborate, insane spin moves where he takes like 7 steps, and he's like, technically by the rule book, this is not travel, and all he does is like increasingally elaborate versions.
It's like MDW hoops. I know he's haunted me for years. I know exactly about
it's so
this
great.
Guy,
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that I literally was going to bring up a similar this sort of video thing because I want to. I'm always kind of back and forth about like I don't want to poo-poo everything. Like there's a ton of great, people writing and thinking about basketball. Probably the part that I lament the most is that a lot of people aren't together talking anymore. It's like all these like silos or whatever. But one of the large order shifts that we're talking about here is like with that True Hoop thing, the process of discovery to publish or whatever, there's got to be a happy medium because 8 weeks is too long, but 45 minutes is too short, where like the process of like looking at a video, immediately having access to the video, and then posting it on Twitter and being like, that's a travel or that's not a travel or whatever, you get to the answer, but to this kind of like larger conversation we're having, you do miss out on the process, or you miss out on the larger order thing of learning how to think creatively, which I miss from these sort of like latter day blog years.
That's why I wanted to write a book, to be totally honest. Like, I wanted permission to go down the rabbit hole, right? Like, it barely makes sense in digital media anymore to really just dump love onto a topic, right? Like I feel like my impulse is almost to be like a parent and just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you're going to be a good kid or not, but I'm just going to love you so much, and we'll just see how it goes, right? Like, and I feel like that about almost everything I work on. And it just doesn't make that much sense if you're going to do, like, quick turn NBA game analysis, right? Like, nobody gives a shit if you do a good job of that or not, right? You can't see the measurable bump if you just lavish attention on it. You could back in the day when it was driven by like Google traffic, right? Like, but you can't now. Like, you just don't see it. And so to me, like, the book was an excuse just to be like, I want to go learn about. I spent whole days reading about owls' eyes.
I loved that part. Where was it? Like, it's like a third of their body weight or something is like dedicated to like using their eyes somehow.
Some owls, a third of the weight of their skull is all eyeballs.
Oh, that's so sad. All right, one last owl fact, and then one Santa Barbara question, and then
Okay.
I learned recently that owls have their eyes are different sizes.
Yeah.
Because that allows them to like see, to like differentiate within like a field of view more clearly, I think. My Santa Barbara question is, did you and Marcus ever ride Gibraltar?
Like, the whole time. That's what we did again. Every time I go there, again and again, we ride to the top of Gibraltar. That's how I did the book. Yeah, it's not for him. It's fine for him. And actually, there's a funny, I wonder if I can find it. There's a very funny picture of Marcus and his friend Jonas and I climbed Gibraltar. Like, there's several different tops, right? This time we went all the way to the tippity top.
Up by the pine trees, yeah.
Up by the pine trees. And when we get there and we pose for the picture, and I only realized once that we get the picture back that, like, my shorts, it looks like I peed myself. I have sweat so much. And somehow my shirt doesn't show the sweat, but my shorts are just like literally only the very bottom part is like a little dry, right? And I think related to that picture, Marcus said to me like a month later, he's like, "Oh, hey, like, you know, like there's this one kind of biking shorts that I just really love, and like, you know, like I got you a pair, and I got next time you come out here, I'm gonna give them to you." And I really think it's because I just looked like a homeless person, you know, because I was so sweaty getting to the top of Gibraltar.
That's awesome.
That's great.
But if you guys know, Gibraltar, for the record, it was like the Queen stage of the Tour of California. It's like I think it's not quite 4,000 feet, but it's something like 4,000 feet of climbing. Just switchbacks with the view steady. Of the ocean. It's just gorgeous.
You lose the trees. It's great.
You logging it on Strava? Where are we at with that?
I don't log anything anywhere. Yeah, I'm here for the air and the company and the view, and like, I don't need some high school kid to try to beat my time tomorrow. You know?
Yeah, that's a climb to be survived.
Got it. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, this was excellent. Henry, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody go. I mean, you were talking, we sort of were eulogizing True, but it exists still. And you and Jared and Coach Thorpe do excellent stuff. So definitely read True Hoop. There's all kinds of, I've spent a lot of time in one particular section of the True Hoop archives. I'll say that.
Wait, what are you talking about?
The one relating to a certain,
the dirty money,
yes.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
That's actually another reason I wrote this book, is because I was just like, that was just ruining my life. Just thinking about the powerful, dirty money, like it makes it hard to go to Walmart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, I got to do something that's just more uplifting. That's no joke. That's part of how we got here.
But
those stories were great, and thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome.
That's great. Thanks so much for having me.